next aspect of fatigue management is managing your stress and psychological factors such as emotions that might come into play in your relationships, or stress that could be built up from your job and being given, a great workload, and having to take work home and having to work late. Which can then, lead to not getting enough sleep. This is common, as are unhealthy relationships that cause, toxic emotions. When I say toxic emotions, I mean emotions that cause things like adrenaline and cortisol responses, which are actually toxic, okay? And so the modern lifestyle is full of these psychological stressors and things that are silent killers that are doing more harm than you might realize. And there's this thing called the mind-body connection. So what you'll find is that all stress and psychological issues that you do not deal with get sublimated and turned into muscle tension and knotting and inflammation and fatigue and other physical symptoms that will just get worse and worse as time goes on and really kill your gains. What can happen is you can start to get knots in your traps. You can start to get, this muscle stiffness and inflammation in the spine, so that it gets to the point where you can't turn your neck all the way and it just causes searing pain. Or you could start having back spasms or, issues with your low back, especially if you're working long hours sitting down. The stress that is psychological will transfer into the body and turn into physical symptoms if you do not deal with it through coping mechanisms and, stress management. And so if you feel like you might have mental stress or any other psychological factors such as depression or issues with relationships that might be, emotionally bad for you, these are things you need to talk to a therapist about and, learn some coping mechanisms for. Otherwise, it's going to stunt your growth and any potential athletic career you might have. And if you don't believe me, that's just because you do not know sports very well, because there's been plenty of professional athletes who have gotten burned out from their career and their busy life and toxic relationships where they've got like these gold-digging women, manipulating them and causing them issues. This happens. This is actually not uncommon. And stress is a silent killer, and it can cause you a lot of physical aches and pains. So that's why it's so important to not be too proud to talk to a therapist. Don't try to be a strong, silent, stoic type of guy who doesn't need to have to deal with their feelings, because that's actually not a great quality as much as you think it might be. Unfortunately, you're wrong. It's really bad for you. It makes it so that the emotions you thought you had under control by ignoring them and suppressing them will actually just, accumulate under the surface in your subconscious mind until eventually they sort of boil over, and then you can't control them anymore, and you start to experience some real serious mental health problems that will then also have physical symptoms and probably behavioral health issues as well. And that can then have some real serious problems that it will cause with your life. So you don't want to get there. When you have stressors and any sort of emotional difficulties, you need to deal with them when they arise. Otherwise, the problems they cause with your training could be just the least of it. But now, moving on from there, the next aspect of fatigue management is heavy lifting. Doing strength training, powerlifting, or any other forms of heavy lifting, doing progressive overload, from 10 reps to 5 and maybe even lower than that, needs to be limited to a low volume. It's going to be lower than other types of training. So if you're used to doing hypertrophy training, endurance training, sports training, whatever, and then you do progressive overload with weight and get into those lower reps with heavier weights, you want to dial back the volume significantly, okay? Heavy training needs to be done at a low volume. And it also needs to be done at a lower frequency as well. You're not going to be able to recover in 24 to 48 hours like you can with hypertrophy training or other types of training. You need 72 hours between sessions when doing heavy work, all right? And basically, the rule here is that the lower the reps and heavier the weight, the more fatigue it produces. So when you are doing strength training and heavy lifting, it is best to keep most of your work in the upper rep range of 3 to 6, or basic strength training, which produces less fatigue than the 1 to 3 rep range. All right? And the more fatigue you have, the lighter you need to go. So if you start to get too much fatigue and are having issues with recovery, that means you need to dial the weight back. And when you are doing progressive overload and are starting to suffer from more and more fatigue and it's starting to become too much, you've tried to balance your relative effort and manage your ergonomic resources and energies right, but you just don't have any more energy to spare and don't know what else to do. First thing you need to do is to cut back the weight on your heaviest lifts. And then the second thing you need to do is to cut back the weight on any exercises that are starting to have a higher stimulus to fatigue ratio. All right, because as I taught you in the last class, exercises that once had a good stimulus to fatigue ratio, as you do more and more progressive overload with them, especially with weight, are going to have their SFR go up more and more and can eventually have a bad SFR. All right, so you want to look at exercises that might be producing fatigue and dial back the weight or make any modifications you need to in order to make them more energy efficient. And if that doesn't work, then you need to just cut them out entirely. Okay, and you may need to cut the intensity down on some workouts and go a little bit easier. Not every session has to be that intense, okay? Even at the end of a block of progressive overload, not every session has to be an RPE 10 or 10 plus. Okay, you do not have to go to and past failure on every session that week. All right, you can have some easier sessions in order to manage your energies properly. And when you're accumulating too much fatigue, even if you were doing high frequency training, then you could actually start to figure in some rest days. So if it's really important for you to complete your next week or two, but you've already accumulated too much fatigue, then the only way to get through it and to, really go balls to the wall in the sessions that you want to do that with, and to do certain heavy lifts that you want to do, might be for you to not do certain days that are just not that important, right? To eliminate certain accessory work, or certain days that just aren't crucial. Doing a deload week or two in extreme cases of fatigue is a must, and a prolonged active rest period once a year after peaking is also very important. And, just the more fatigue you have accumulated, the more rest you need. That's the bottom line, and there's just no way to keep training harder and harder once you have accumulated a certain amount of fatigue, and your body will tell you and you need to listen to it. Okay, so that being said, that actually concludes this class on fatigue management, and you can look very forward to the next and final class in not only this part of the program, but this entire semester, which will be on recovery and is such an important class that will then end this semester of the program, after which there is going to be a break for the summer. So make sure to stay tuned for that. I hope you found this class helpful. Now, make sure to put what information you learned into practice right away before you forget, okay? That way it can actually go to work for you, because speed of implementation is one of the keys to success. If you have any questions or need any help, be sure to let me know either in the comments below or by the email address that is in the video description below. And if you are passionate about fitness but don't have time to do all of your own programming yourself and would like to have an expert programmer like me create and manage all of your fitness routines and planning for you, who can systematize your training so that you can reach your goals as fast as possible, be sure to inquire about my online personal training and fitness programming services. No matter what your schedule, budget, or goals, I can formulate the exact right program for you that will expedite your progress and growth and get you the body you want sooner rather than later, okay? And without ever spinning your wheels in the mud or hitting a plateau. And if you liked anything that I said in this video, be sure to hit that like button and the subscribe button and notification bell too, so that you can get all of my other videos that are like this one. And just remember that these videos are actually part of a course that is laid out in a linear fashion. So make sure you have seen all of the videos before this one that you need to see, and that you are subscribed and will continue to watch the videos that you watch on this channel in the order that they are presented to you.